what are the written Gospels? Were they biographies of Jesus? Not really. A Gospel is an ancient Mediterranean in-group document written by and for a Jesus group, and not at all for outsiders. Gospel documents are absolutely unconcerned for outsiders, and not written for them or about them. They were not intended for any missionary purposes, meaning to evangelize outsiders or to proselytize them to become insiders. Gospels are in-group retellings of the well-known story of Jesus, well-known to Jesus group insiders, specifically tweaked for the particular Jesus group in its specific circumstances living decades after the Jesus movement. Gospel documents were occasional documents. What does that mean? They were occasional, meaning they were not written for all people of all times. The Gospels we have, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, and other Gospels too that didn't make the canonical cut, were all group maintenance documents. They were written to be read within specific Jesus groups to maintain group loyalty to the God of Israel as revealed in the experience of Jesus. Gospels are documents which are not theological in scope. As Drs. Richard Rohrbaugh and Bruce Molina explain, these documents are not theological in content, purpose, or scope, meaning they are not explicitly concerned with articulating, expressing, unfolding, or explaining God, the nature of God, ideas or definitions of God, as theology usually is. Sure, the Gospels are theological in that they talk about God and they're full of God talk. In that sense, they are theological, but nothing like systematic theology or theological treatise was being written in the Scriptures. That kind of thing really begins with Origen for what would later become Christianity in 325 Common Era. First-century Mediterranean people, including Israelites, had no explicit religion. Religion was not a discrete institution separate from other institutions in society, back in the days of Jesus and for the subsequent generations of his followers. Rather, people of that time had domestic religion and political religion. Or better, religion existed diffused or embedded in either kinship or politics. The Gospels articulate Jesus' political religion for a decades later audience devoted to a domestic kinship religion, that of Israelite brothers and sisters in Christ. Christ is a political term. Brothers and sisters are kinship terms. In other words, the Gospel stories tell of Jesus' activity within a framework of Israelite politics. Jesus' program was one of proclaiming theocracy, kingdom of Skyvault, or wrongly translated, kingdom of heaven, with God as patron. Think the Don in the Godfather trilogy. Jesus acts as broker between the clients, Israelites, and the God of Israel, the patron, and he was crucified as a political agitator. Those being addressed by the Gospel stories were later Jesus followers who had formed fictive kin groups with a religious agenda articulated in kinship terms. That's why they called themselves brothers and sisters. The stories of Jesus told in the synoptic Gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke are essentially meant to be narratives that might make sense of the experience of those hearing the stories. Gospels are directly about making sense of the lives of the in-group hearers, and only indirectly making sense of the life of Jesus. The Gospel narratives have a beginning, and a middle, and an end. And generally, narratives begin with an equilibrium. Articulate a disturbed equilibrium, and then seek a restored equilibrium in the end. The presumption is that hearers of the story, various Jesus in-groups, lived in a situation of disturbed equilibrium. The story of Jesus is meant in the end to restore equilibrium to their lives in their ongoing life story. Therefore, the story of a given gospel is meant to carry or support Jesus group members, to help them make sense of their experiences. It provides them with a fictive kin group religion and offers them social mooring or pegs on which to hang all of their lived experiences. In other words, the Gospels are not directly concerned with making sense of the experience of Jesus, but rather with making sense of the lives of his followers living decades later. The stories of Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, are each, in their own way, focused on what the God of Israel gives to faithful Israelites by means of Jesus, with the help of the apostles. As a rule, Jesus' opponents are Israelite elites and hostile spirits. The God of Israel overcomes these enemies through Jesus. In other words, the audiences of the gospel stories, as faithful Israelites, identified with what God did to Israel through Jesus, with what God did for Israel through Jesus. Most specifically, the Gospels were written by and for third-wave Jesus group members who wished to know about the first-wave experience that accounted for their own fictive kinship groups. The Gospels tell of what Jesus said and did in a way relevant to third-wave Jesus group members. Second-wave writers, such as Paul, say almost nothing about what Jesus said and did. It's as if he wasn't interested in that. Documents such as the Gospels of Mark and Matthew tell the story of a certain personage located at the origins of some movement group, and these are usually third-wave documents. In other words, from a social scientific point of view, the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, and also Luke Acts, reflects a well-known third-generation principle. In a situation of radical and irreversible change, grandchildren, third-wavers, wish to remember what children, second-wavers, wish to forget of the experience of first-wave or first-generation parents. Note that Luke Acts is a fourth-wave document, but this applies to Luke Acts as well because Acts concerns Paul, and Acts would be third-wave or third generation from Paul.